Hey everyone, my name's Trista Patterson, Director of Gaming Sustainability. We're here to talk today about sustainability at Xbox. And today we're going to be taking a deeper look at how everyone can play their part. I'm accompanied by Dan Jacobs, our Program Manager Extraordinaire for Sustainability Gaming. And today we're going to talk to you about a number of different topics many of you have experienced at Xbox or may be interested in interacting with us in the future. You may be wondering about why does sustainability matter in gaming? You may be wondering what Xbox's commitments are with respect to sustainability and what our user research shows about what the gaming community wants. You may be interested to hear about what projects are underway at Xbox, and if you're a game developer or publisher wondering what you can do, you can find out more with us. One of the really important pieces of information I want you to take away from this presentation is that no matter where you are, no matter how much time you have, no matter what resources are at your disposal, no matter what size your studio, you have an opportunity to make a massive impact with gaming sustainability. And we're here to help you get that extra tooling, those extra resources, and especially get hooked up with peers that can enlighten and inspire you and give you a whole new set of ways in which you can make positive impact with your work in game design. Today, we're going to start with beginning about why there's even a sustainability talk. One is that it taps into our natural inclination to bring about hope, heroism, wonder, and community, all of these values that are deeply tied to gaming and the success and the way in which it taps into people's natural enthusiasm. Second is efficiency. I don't think you need me to tell you about how heightened people's awareness are about the way in which they are using natural resources and energy, the costs that might be escalated in their household as they're gaming, or if you're a small business owner, how you can cut costs, waste, and emission by employing different sustainability strategies. Also, pioneering. How can you create great game narratives that the world doesn't have yet? And how can you create great new opportunities for yourself and for employees to make a more rewarding career path and leadership opportunities in the future? And then behavior, we can all support how understanding of gameplay experiences can translate into real world outcomes, leading game design to be one of those influential cultural impacts that is affecting the world over. You may or may not be aware that Microsoft, and thus Xbox, has one of the most aggressive goals with respect to climate in the gaming industry. This means by being part of Team Xbox, you too are enjoying that competitive advantage. Microsoft has goals to be carbon negative by 2030. This means an absolute reduction in all of Microsoft's emissions by about 55% up to 2030. And this is inclusive of scope 1, 2, and 3. Now, that's a detail we're going to cover in the next slide. But meanwhile, Microsoft also has aggressive goals to become carbon negative by 2050. And that means that removing all of the carbon that has been emitted to the environment by the company, either directly or through electrical consumption, since company founding in 1975. Let's take a look at what are the emission scopes. This is a technical diagram here that everyone, no matter how long they work with carbon emissions, has to take a second look at. On one hand, there is scope 1. That is all the emissions that result from the direct owned infrastructure at Xbox and Microsoft. Scope 2 results from all of the emissions that come from electrical use that are consumed on that owned infrastructure by Xbox and Microsoft. Scope 3 is of special importance to you because it involves all of the emissions that happen either upstream from Xbox and Microsoft or downstream, which could be either you as the providers upstream or the gamers downstream. And this is by far the biggest section of emissions across Microsoft and Xbox. Microsoft secured 1.4 million metric tons of carbon removal in 20 to 21. This exceeded our goal and also is one of those commitments that we make to you as a service provider to Xbox to be able to become carbon neutral in delivery of your services. It's also important to remember that Xbox is also playing its part by paying into the Microsoft-wide carbon fee. The carbon fee is levied against each one of Microsoft's business groups, and as a consequence, creates the fund that then creates the ability for Microsoft to fund carbon removal over time. This fee has been rising over time, as well creating the internal incentive for us to meet our goals as an organization. Our research shows that customers do care about climate. You may have been noticing with either your gamers or the community or even in your household, increasing concerns about climate, vulnerability with biodiversity, fires, rolling blackouts, or all of the things that have become part of our day-to-day news cycle. And these events are becoming more severe and more heightened in our public awareness. As a consequence, consumers are beginning to choose in a greater alignment to their value system. Maybe they choose to download games instead of buying physical discs. Maybe they might unplug the devices or use power strips, or even energy conservation or energy saver mode on their consoles. Maybe they have traded in games or hardware to reduce waste or submitted many of their electronics for recycling in e-waste. Or maybe they've bought products that have post-consumer recycled packaging, or bought products that allow them to recycle more content after their use. Maybe they are downloading content during off-peak hours. And this can be important because those peak hours are more often likely to be very carbon intensive. Those evening hours are more likely to be less carbon intensive. And so the timing that we build into our consoles has a lot to do with the carbon footprint of what happens when gamers are playing the games that they have downloaded. At Xbox, we're aiming high, and we can do this together. Games have an enormous reach around the world, and there's a massive collective impact at scale that is yet unrecognized, either across the industry or worldwide. There's a sense of inspiration in games that can directly translate to real-world action, and a purpose and path forward that the community of Xbox has really rallied around. Over 75% of German and US gamers that were surveyed want gaming companies to make statements about their sustainability effort, report back to them in quantitative fashion, and encourage gamers to take sustainable actions. And with your help, we can increasingly build that content into games. Right now, I'm going to pass the presentation over to my colleague, Dan, and he's going to walk you through some of the ways that you can interact with Xbox, its staff, and its support services to increase gaming sustainability in your neck of the woods. Dan?
Thank you, Trista. Yes, as Trista mentioned at the start, my name is Daniel Jacobs. I'm a gaming sustainability PM here in Xbox. And yeah, I'll take you through the next half of the deck. Okay, so as you can see on the screen here, this is a nice overview slide to kind of give you an idea of how everything works inside of gaming. And we want to be as transparent as possible during this presentation. And given that Xbox is making major investments in the sustainability space, I wanted to take a couple of minutes exploring how our sustainability project is built inside gaming. Now, maybe you can reflect these ideas in your own organization, I don't know. So if we go from clockwise from the top, both Trista and I sit in XPS, or Xbox Product Services. And our initial task was to help assemble carbon accounting tooling to track progress of gaming towards our carbon negative commitment. So without the correct reporting in place, obviously we can't monitor our progress. So we're reaching a place where internally we can use telemetry to report on our platform's carbon emissions. Now, these same tools can be applied to offer incentives for other groups inside Xbox, because because it gives them a way to better understand their trajectory and return on investment for their own projects. Now, although reporting is always a work in progress, we're getting there bit by bit. And before you ask, yes, we are absolutely planning how we can expose gaming sustainability telemetry direct to publishers and developers for you to use in a self-service capacity. Now, if you set your own carbon reduction goals, which includes Scope 3 downstream emissions, then this will hopefully help you. And Trista mentioned before about what those sorts of Scope 3 emissions actually mean. Now, next on this slide is Geo, or Gaming Ecosystem, who are our third-party publisher accounts team. Our friends in Geo maintain the relationship with all publishers, including most of you in the audience today. And Geo are on hand for any feedback you might have on Xbox, including sustainability. So if you get to the end of this presentation and want to offer feedback, or maybe you want to ask questions, learn more, or share what you're working on, then please do reach out to your Microsoft point of contact, who will almost certainly be in that Geo team. Now, next is marketing, comms, and social outreach. And these wonderful people are responsible for telling our sustainability story. So if you have ideas for future sustainability marketing collaboration between yourselves and Xbox, then these are the people who would love to hear your ideas. Now, you might have seen in March, we released the new Xbox, or the brand new Xbox Sustainability Hub on xbox.com, which you can find our xbox.com/sustainability. Now, this page announces some of the highlights so far across our game sustainability journey, from things like power savings to carbon emissions reduction to waste reduction and other partnerships, among other things, I should say. So with the help of our marketing and comms teams, we hope to update these pages regularly during the years ahead, each time sharing something new that we've done. Now, hopefully this can influence the community at large. Perhaps your business would like to partner with us on sustainability initiatives of any description. Just let us know. Next on this slide are XGS, obviously Xbox Game Studios. And they build and release games, as I'm sure you're well aware. Now, you'll hear a lot more later on what outreach and educational narratives some of these studios have already been weaving into their games. So we'll hear more later about what Minecraft and Forza specifically have already covered. But suffice to say, we'll also have other studios preparing to tell their sustainability stories and participate more with alliances like the United Nations-led Playing for the Planet Alliance. And both Trista and I will cover more about this in a few more slides from now. The key point being, though, is anyone can get involved, and there's lots of people out there to help. Now, the penultimate team here is GXP, Gaming Experiences and Platforms, as you can see on the left. Now, GXP are the engineering teams who build our Xbox hardware and software, and perhaps leverage our carbon reporting the most. Now, they're hard at work finding new and exciting ways to lower our usage and manufacturing carbon footprint with constant innovations. Now, you might have heard of Energy Saver mode on the console. That's the low energy standby mode for Xbox that was pushed out to all consoles last year. Well, GXP are the ones who built that feature, and they're also pursuing many other improvements, such as big changes in recyclability across all our devices and packaging. In conjunction with other teams, they're investigating ways to further optimize system and game resources to use less power on the console. But importantly, and what I'd say very importantly, none of this will happen at the expense of gaming fidelity. So if you have ideas on how Xbox could maybe save power resources for gameplay runtime, for example, please reach out and we would love to hear your ideas. Now, last but most certainly not least is xCloud and the game streaming team, which is powered by Microsoft Azure Cloud Services for the most part. Now, Team xCloud are hard at work understanding the power and carbon footprint from start point to end point. And it's a fun challenge because xCloud servers are extremely unique, but we are definitely getting there bit by bit. Now, you'll be pleased to know that we still very much have a commitment to have Azure services powered entirely by renewable energy by 2025. And we refer to this as the 100-100-0, which means 100% of the electrons, 100% of the time, zero carbon emissions. So I hope that gives a nice overview of, you know, what's going on in Xbox to do with gaming sustainability. Obviously, there's a lot more, but limited to time, as I'm sure you understand. Okay, so the next slide is looking a bit more at recyclability in Xbox, another very important part of our sustainability journey. So I wanted to touch upon our progress here. Now, I recognize that many of you work for gaming organizations who will likely sell merchandise, lots of or a little bit, but merchandise nonetheless, from toys to clothing and probably everything in between. Now, some of you probably have merchandise in all four corners of the globe, owing to the success and appeal of, you know, gaming. Now, on that basis, let me explain what we've done and committed to do so, that maybe you can adopt something similar. So early in 2021, Xbox unveiled its first devices which incorporate post-consumer recycled resins, or PCR for short. Essentially, we're reusing plastics from things like you see on the screen, you know, from old CDs. If any of you remember what CDs are these days, because, you know, we don't use CDs much these days, do we? Automotive headlights, water jugs, and so on. Now, this PCR is used in new Electric Volt and Daystrike Camo Special Edition controllers. For a little extra detail, we built these controllers, and since then other controllers using approximately, depending on the type of controller, but approximately 30% PCR materials externally and 50% PCR materials internally. Now, the AquaShift controller followed in the Volt and Daystrike Camo's footsteps with PCR, including in its manufacturing process. And even many of the colors used in the manufacturing of our Xbox Design Lab controllers are now derived from PCR. So even better still is the Xbox Series S, the actual console itself. And it's the first ever console to incorporate PCR resins in the manufacturing of the body and various internal components. And both the Xbox Series S and X have achieved a 97% recyclability by material type per the UL methodology in OECD countries. But look, we know there's loads more to be done, and we'll be pushing a lot more similar design achievements into future Xbox devices, alongside a strong push to lower e-waste for Microsoft devices using even better recyclability methodologies in the coming future. And I think the last part of this slide is just sharing what our other commitments are and how they could potentially inspire you. So you may or may not have read the corporate sustainability report that we published at the start of the year. And that it explains more about how we will have single-use plastic packaging elimination by 2025, 100% recyclable packaging by 2030, 100% certified sustainable forest and fibers by no later than 2025, and last but not least, 100% recycled, renewable, or responsibly sourced content by 2030. Now, I hope that's a decent early explanation of what we're working on in this space. And that, like I said at the start, hopefully you can roll this into your own business model. And we'll touch a little bit more about circular economy just a little later in this presentation. Okay, so XGS. Now, as you're mostly probably aware, Xbox has a lot of game studios who release lots of great content. And we're well aware that our game studios have a great opportunity to reach many, many millions of gamers. But we also want to encourage you and the audience to consider how you can also participate in educating the world to help entertain and educate across a variety of topics. Now, with the examples on the screen, you'll see I picked two from Microsoft and one from our friends at Ubisoft. Now, Mojang have built things like Sustainability City and Climate Futures in Minecraft. Just taking Climate Futures, it takes players through a series of lessons which focus on a different set of sustainable development goals, and they offer students and gamers an opportunity to build collaborative solutions. Now, Mojang have brilliantly partnered with institutions like the Met Office here in the UK, UNESCO, WWF, the Nature Conservancy, who I'm sure you've heard of most of these, and more. And, well, you know, with 100 million downloads of education collection content in the first 6 months after it was released back in 2020, it's safe to say that there's a strong appetite for this kind of sustainability and educational content. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves, right? So even an estimated 500,000 students have participated in the Minecraft Education Edition build challenges, such as 2021's Global Build Challenge with the United Nations UNESCO, which is United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization at UNESCO. Now, moving on to Forza, the Forza franchise, between Forza Motorsport and Forza Horizon, Turn 10 and Playground Games are doing something similar with electric cars in the Forza franchise, allowing gamers to enjoy the benefits of electrical vehicles and improving their discoverability. Now, a good time to also mention that, Minecraft, go back to Minecraft, I should have mentioned this sooner, actually, play a large part in Xbox's involvement with Playing for the Planet. And it's a UN-facilitated alliance. So the Playing for the Planet Alliance includes numerous publishers and developers who work to introduce green touches into gameplay. And this is something I'll discuss a little bit later, and Trista will pick up a little bit later as well. But we're hoping other studios from third party and first party, for that matter, will become increasingly more involved, which brings us on brilliantly to the last part on the screen, and more about the Playing for the Planet Alliance at Anno 1800. So Playing for the Planet Alliance also has a green game jam, and the aim of the jam is for studios to innovate on games with existing player bases or those which are soon to be released. So in 2021, I think about 26, maybe just under 30 studios, which includes some big names ranging from PC, console, and mobile, entered the jam. And the winners are then announced across multiple categories. And the winner of UNEP's 2021 Choice Award was Anno 1800, a game released by Ubisoft Mainz. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Now, in Anno 1800, which takes place in the era of industrialization, players interact with and take advantage of the environment around them without repercussion. So to highlight the importance of sustainability and the interdependencies of ecosystems, the team fantastically introduced a new game mode called Eden Burning, with sort of upside-down game rules focusing on these themes. Now, in this mode, players need to carefully choose the resources they use to build an industrial project while preserving the natural ecosystem. And their decisions, gamers' decisions, to use renewable or non-renewable resources will directly impact their environment. So I think that's just a wonderful idea of how Ubisoft Mainz built this game with upside-down rules with a focus on sustainability. And look, we are really keen to collaborate, like I mentioned at the start, with marketing things and comms. So if you're working on something similar and think Xbox will be interested in promoting, reach out, let us know. More than happy to have that conversation. Okay, so let's move on to the next slide. Now, this is really about how you get started and a little bit more about how you can collaborate. And now, don't be intimidated by all the writing on this screen. We'll go through it bit by bit. Now, a lot of the content really is focused on ideas you can apply to your own business. Before we get into the good stuff, for context on the left, these graphs, the bar charts on the left, are taken from our eco profiles. And you can see that Xbox's emissions are almost entirely from the use of our sold products, with the production of our devices filling up almost the rest of our emissions footprint. Now, what this is basically saying is all Xbox devices we sell are plugged into the wall socket of our customers' homes. Now, the electricity from the wall socket comes from energy grids comprised of a mixture of fossil fuels and renewable energy. And the energy produced in that grid from CO2 intensive sources is then included in our calculations. Now, we can identify the CO2 emissions factors from the geographical location of our devices where they're used, by leveraging emissions factor tables. And you can get these from places like the IEA, which is the International Energy Agency. And this is how we know in Xbox our usage footprint. And it's that usage footprint that Microsoft are pursuing to remove from the atmosphere by 2030 to allow us to become carbon negative. So we're making a huge investment in this space. Now, looking further into usage, you can see that at the graph on the bottom, the little chart on the bottom, you can see that the gaming mode uses most of the power, therefore the most electricity in our customers' homes. So in Xbox, this is typically where the most of our investments for pursuing improvement is going. Although, don't be mistaken to think we're not investing a lot to improve other things across our supply and value chains. But what about you as developers and publishers, now that you know that? Okay, cool. So the good news is we also have tools for you to assess your own carbon footprint. Now, Microsoft Cloud for Sustainability is available for users today and is an extensible software as a service solution that helps you record, report, and reduce your organization's environmental impact. And it's got some really cool automated data connections and actionable insights in there for you to use. And all of this allows you to record your emissions to understand your impact. So if you set yourself some goals, then this should help you in that journey. And as Trista mentioned at the very start of the presentation, customers are increasingly caring about where they spend their money, and they want to make sure that the businesses they invest their money in have environmental aspirations to improve their supply chain. So I think this is an important factor in your decisions when you come away from this presentation. So what about recyclability commitments? As we move down the bullet points on the right. Okay, so we've already touched on what Xbox is doing with recyclability, but can you invest more of a circular economy into a circular economy? Now, what does that mean? So in contrast to the take, make, waste linear model, that's right, take, make, waste linear model, a circular economy is regenerative by design and aims to gradually decouple growth from the consumption of finite resources. So if you produce lots of merchandise, it's again something you can get involved in. And again, like I've said before, if you're already leveraging improvements in recyclability with your products, please let us know, because we would love to learn more about how we can potentially collaborate and share ideas. Now, moving down again, there's also some fantastic industry forums for you to join and learn more, as I mentioned that we will be discussing later in this presentation, which is now. On the screen, you can see open groups like the UK Interactive Entertainment, which is UKI for short, or the International Game Developers Association and their Climate Special Interest Group, or IGDA-SIG, or the Play for the Planet Alliance, which you might see as PFTP or P4TP, depending on where you search and look for it on the internet, but it stands for Playing for the Planet Alliance. And the good news is it's open to anyone and everyone. Now, all their content is out there on the web to find and has lots of education to jump straight in and find out how you can get onboarded. Now, maybe you can help promote various ecological events like Earth Day or Oceans Week, for example. I think the key takeaway from this slide is that we all have our own unique abilities and skills to participate, but don't be intimidated. Please don't be intimidated, because resources are out there to help you adopt new goals and commitments to get involved. There are so many helpful people to help and loads for novices to learn on day one. And there is a whole dedicated slide in about 3 slides from now, all about the Playing for the Planet Alliance, because it's wonderful. And Trista will take you through that in a few slides from now. Okay, so as we jump on to the next slide, which you can now see, this is about other energy saving ideas, right? We've only got a limited amount of time in this presentation, but there's some really cool opportunities here. Okay, what are these? So again, I want to share as many things as possible here. One of the ideas at the start is around game streaming, and always make sure that the resolution you want outputted at the client matches their capabilities, which in turn can reduce costly compute performance. Now, this applies to cloud and console. So don't pump out, 4K visuals for someone and use all the bandwidth required for it if their native device only supports 720, for example. Now, one more recent area we're investigating around identifying the best times for when renewable energy is at its highest in the grids around the world. Now, this is really cool. Okay, check this out. You're going to love this. Okay, so electricity grid emissions intensity is relative to each location at certain times. So some solutions like WattTime or electricity grid identify emissions intensity on a scale of 1 to 100, relative to each location and relative to the time of day or night. Now, lower on the scale is the cleanest this grid gets because it's got more renewable energy in the grid at that time in that location. But higher on the scale is the dirtiest this grid gets because it's got more fossil fuels in the energy grid at that time and location. Now, leveraging tech such as this gives you the latent ability to automatically run on cleaner energy depending on when your computational power is needed. Now, these APIs, like WattTimes, and I mentioned others are available, are packaged into a set of APIs and tools called automated emissions reduction, which offer real-time forecasted emissions data. Now, one of the most powerful environmental actions a company can take with this is a kind of set it and forget it simplicity. So something you might want to investigate, and let us know what you use it for, because we are starting to investigate that for maybe updates. Push updates out at certain times of the day or evening that has the most renewable energy in the grid where you live. It's a really cool idea. Now, the penultimate one here is intelligent delivery, and maybe something you already know about, so I won't dwell too long. But essentially, it's a feature with the aim of reducing game install sizes, but at the same time, it also reduces power and energy because there's less for the console to download and less for the console to install for your game. Now, as we discussed earlier, every watt hour used by hardware and software has an associated carbon impact, right, from the energy grid. So intelligent delivery allows the console to selectively download and unpack assets for specific titles, therefore filtering out unnecessary content. So you can save many, many, many gigabytes of data that's being downloaded and installed every single time you release a content update to the service. And last but not least on this slide is, I've said it several times already, and I can't stress it enough. Please talk to us if you've got ideas or solutions or feedback or suggestions that you would like us to investigate on your behalf. Things like narrative ideas or things like game optimization ideas that you may think would lower the electricity consumption of all of our devices or your game running on our devices. Maybe you want tools to understand how to better use CPU, GPU usage, things like that. So whatever your idea is, reach out, let us know. We're really, really keen to hear your feedback. This is a journey for everyone. Let's not forget that. And I will finish my part of this presentation before I hand back to Trista with this slide. Now, I'm not going to go through everything here because there's a lot to read out, and this is perhaps more suitable for you to pause here on your playback and, read back later. But, these are just 3, 6, 9, these are just 12 ideas that there are 12, aren't there? Yes, there are 12. That would be embarrassing. 12 ideas that, we thought of ideas that you could maybe roll into your game. There's loads of different games and loads of this, and we understand it's where contextually appropriate. If we just pick Master Chief in Halo, for example, he couldn't come out and talk to you about Bumblebee conservation. That would be something more for Minecraft. But there's the opportunity to do plenty of other things as well, and that sort of style game. So you can have a quick look here. Maybe you can do donations for every piece of DLC sold to a certain sustainable initiative. Maybe you could introduce objectives into your game that would educate gamers about how their choices can affect the environment around them. You get the idea. So, we won't dwell too long on this, but lots of opportunities, lots of ways to educate gamers, and I think most importantly, lots of ways to influence the world, right? Become a leader. Anyone can become a leader in this particular area. So I will now hand back to my colleague Trista, who will carry on for the rest of the deck. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dan. Before I speak to Playing for the Planet, which is a really remarkable initiative that I'm sure you're going to want to hear more about, I want to also go back to two of the things that Dan said a few slides ago in the way that you can get involved. Keep your eye out for Yuki. Yuki is one of the groups that is putting out the Green Game Guide, which also includes a 5-point action plan for decarbonizing. And it's a tool that you could search for today and quickly put into action no matter where you are. Second is the International Game Developers Association. Dan mentioned it before, but I wanted to underscore how vibrant this community is, how easy it is to access, and how inspiring all of the examples. They're very active on Discord. They're wonderful to reach out to. So I'd really encourage you to go in that direction. And then thirdly, because you're part of Xbox, you can also communicate and participate with us with the UN Playing for the Planet initiative. This is a group of 36 of the world's largest video game companies who have come together forming an alliance, which is rallying the industry to reduce its carbon footprint, inspiring environmental action, and telling a new story of impact. There are many different ways in which you can become involved, reduce carbon, and persuade others to get involved. The Playing for the Planet initiative also has a really amazing game jam. There's one game jam that's starting in April this year, and something that you can also see some of the results of in the next month or two. So keep an eye out for those. Lastly, I'd like you to consider how you can become a leader. If you have thought that any of this information is inspiring to you, or is something that isn't quite accessible to you, or isn't doing what you would like to do in order to achieve your dreams in the area of sustainability, we really want to hear from you. No matter where you are in your organization, you can make a massive impact in this part of the gaming industry. It is rapidly developing, and its impact is becoming more and more important and visible. The stakes are really high, and we need everyone to do their part as well as collaborate with everyone else across the industry to create that ripple effect that reaches out across the world. Within Xbox, you have a number of very powerful resources that are currently undergoing advancement in tooling, technology, databases, and access to information. Right now, those are still in development mode, but as we get into a point where we can release those to you, we also want to hear your feedback about the features and flexibility that you need as a game designer. So follow your own escalation path within Xbox. You know who you interact with more, bring it up in conversation, talk about the pieces that you're excited about, and be sure to put voice to your vision. Together, we can make the greatest impact. I really want to thank you for coming today. On behalf of Dan and myself and the whole Gaming Sustainability Unit, we are super excited to work with you, and we look forward to teaming up with you in the near future. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of XFast.